My name is Emily Carter, and I used to believe that family meant safety. That was before everything fell apart. Before the hospital calls. Before the betrayal. Before the night I uncovered the one secret that destroyed my entire life, but saved my daughter's. It started on a Monday morning, like any other. My daughter, Sophie, had just turned 6 and had spent the weekend coughing on and off. Nothing alarming at first, just a mild cold, or so I thought. By the time I got her to the clinic, her fingers were tinged blue, and the doctor's face went pale when he listened to her lungs. She needs surgery, he told me, soon. They diagnosed her with a rare congenital defect, a hole in the wall between the chambers of her heart that had gone unnoticed. I sat in the hospital hallway gripping the paperwork, too stunned to cry. My husband, Jason, was out of state on a 2-week construction contract, trying to pull in extra income because times were already tight. We had been saving every dollar we could for emergencies, and that account held exactly $7,000. It wasn't easy for us. Jason worked 60-hour weeks and I cleaned houses part-time while raising Sophie, but we did it together. Or so I thought. The hospital required an upfront payment to schedule the surgery. They gave me 3 days. I didn't panic. I had a plan. Jason's parents, Richard and Linda Carter, lived just a few miles away and had always presented themselves as the helpful, salt-of-the-earth type. Richard was a retired sheriff's deputy. Linda was the kind of woman who brought cookies to bake sales and quoted Bible verses before dinner. I called them that night. Told them everything. Cried through the words. Linda sounded sympathetic, overly so. Don't you worry, sweetheart. We'll go to the bank first thing and handle it. You just focus on that little girl of yours. I should have known better. The next morning, I handed them the bank card and PIN to our joint emergency fund. I wrote down the hospital's payment instructions, double-checked every detail, and hugged Linda at the door. Thank you, I whispered. She smiled and kissed my cheek. This is what family is for. That afternoon, I called the hospital to confirm the wire transfer had gone through. Nothing. I waited. Told myself to be patient. Maybe there was a delay. The next day, still nothing. On day 3, I drove to their house with Sophie in the back seat. She was pale and quiet, curled under a blanket. Linda opened the door in her floral apron, a mixing bowl in one hand. Emily. Oh, we were just about to call. The bank's been having a system issue, technical trouble. Richard went down there himself to sort it out. I stared at her. Did the money go through or not? Well, not yet, but it will. Did you try to send it? She hesitated. A flicker of something, guilt? Annoyance, crossed her face. Emily, don't you trust us? No. In that moment, I realized I didn't. I left without answers. That night, I logged into the bank account from my phone. Balance, $0. The entire $7,000 had been withdrawn in cash 2 days prior. No wire transfer. No receipt. No Sophie's surgery. I called Jason. Told him everything. He was furious, but torn. There's got to be a mistake, he said, half believing it himself. Maybe Dad misunderstood. I'll handle it when I get back. But time wasn't something Sophie had. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, the ache in my chest growing heavier by the minute. That's when I remembered something. A few years ago, Jason had mentioned, just in passing, that his father had left the sheriff's department under weird circumstances. I'd asked him about it once, but he brushed it off with a laugh. Old small-town politics. Nothing serious. But now, I wasn't so sure. The next day, I dug through the attic. Jason had kept some of his old files and high school stuff in 2 blue storage bins. I rummaged through yearbooks, basketball trophies, and folders filled with forgotten school reports. Then, in an unmarked envelope, I found a letter. It was handwritten, dated 1994, and signed by someone named Carl Harrow. The writing was neat but cold. "This is the last time I will ever contact you. What you did for me and my family. I won't forget it. But never reach out again. If the truth ever comes out, we're both finished." I read it 3 times. It made no sense. Who was Carl Harrow? And what had Richard done for him? I turned over the envelope. Scribbled faintly on the back was a location, Clearwater County. I typed it into my phone. That's when I found it. A news archive. Faded and buried, but still there. Teen girl missing in Clearwater, April Harrow, 16. Disappeared without a trace in 1994. Father, Carl Harrow. Last seen, arguing with a sheriff's deputy outside a gas station. My skin turned cold. The deputy's name was redacted in the article, but I already knew who it was. Richard Carter. I was shaking when I closed my phone. I wasn't just dealing with theft anymore. This wasn't about $7,000. This was about a girl who never came home. And the man who might have made sure she never would. I didn't sleep after finding the letter. I kept hearing Sophie's raspy breaths from the baby monitor and replaying the news article in my mind. April Harrow. 16. Vanished. Richard Carter, my father-in-law, had resigned quietly that same year. Coincidence? I didn't believe in them anymore. The next morning, I packed Sophie's bag and dropped her at my friend Megan's house. I didn't tell her why. Just asked for help, my voice breaking. Megan agreed without questions, bless her heart. I drove straight to the Clearwater County Public Records Office. The town was 2 hours away, but I didn't care. Inside, it was dusty and quiet. I asked about employment records for former deputies from 1994 and filed a request under open access. The clerk, a thin older man with glasses, gave me a curious glance when I asked specifically about Richard Carter. He returned with a slim folder. Employment start, August 1985. Resignation, July 1994. Reason, personal leave due to family matters. No disciplinary record. Nothing official. But I wasn't surprised. Back then, police covered for each other, especially in small towns. I asked to see the missing persons file on April Harrow. That case is cold, the clerk said. Hasn't been touched in over 2 decades. You a journalist? No, I said, just curious. He handed me what was left of the file. Photos of April. Pretty, blonde, braces still on. A small note written by the original detective. Witness saw April get into a dark-colored sheriff's cruiser at the corner of Hillman and Lakeview. Officer was not identified. No logs confirm a pickup. Search area cleared within 24 hours. There were gaps, huge ones. No follow-up. No interviews with other officers. Just silence. And that letter I'd found at home? It made sense now. Richard had done something for Carl Harrow, something so serious they both agreed to never speak again. I copied what I could and left. Back in the car, I stared at the photo of April. She looked like someone's best friend. Someone's daughter. She looked like Sophie. That night, I didn't cry. I watched Linda Carter post a smiling casserole on Facebook with the caption, "Family dinner tastes better when it's made with love." I wanted to vomit. They had stolen my daughter's chance at life-saving surgery, then pretended it never happened. Now I had proof, not just of theft, but something far darker. And I was the only one who knew. But I needed help. I reached out to a woman named Marla Jennings, a retired detective I found mentioned in an old forum about the Harrow case. She still lived in the state. I sent her a polite email, explaining that I was looking into a cold case that might involve someone I knew. She called me within an hour. Her voice was rough, like someone who'd smoked through 1,000 crime scenes. "You said you had information on April Harrow?" she asked. "Yes. Who are you?" I'm Emily Carter. My father-in-law, his name is Richard Carter. He worked as a deputy in Clearwater during the time April vanished. There was a pause. I remember Richard, she said slowly. He was never on the suspect list. But that case, it never sat right with me. I found a letter. And a location. And a timeline. I think he covered something up. Meet me tomorrow, she said. I'll bring what I've got if you bring what you found. The next day, we met in a diner off the freeway. She was tough-looking, older, but sharp. She didn't waste time. We exchanged files. She read the letter with narrowed eyes. This is huge, she whispered. Then she dropped her own bomb. There was always suspicion around Carl Harrow. Abuse allegations. April ran away before, once. But the police botched the investigation. No follow-up. And one deputy refused to take April's statement before she disappeared. She slid me a name. Deputy Richard Carter. They never proved anything. But Marla believed he helped Carl cover up something horrible. And that April was the victim. Why would he do that? I asked. Some men protect each other. Others have their own secrets. Either way, it was a betrayal of duty. We parted ways with a plan. She would take the documents to a contact she still had at the State Bureau of Investigation. If there was a chance to reopen the case, we'd do it. Meanwhile, I had something else to do. I wasn't going to wait for justice. I wanted my daughter's money back, now. That night, I drove to Richard and Linda's house. I didn't call. Didn't knock politely. I banged on the door until it opened. Linda stood there in a robe. Emily? What are you? I walked past her. Richard was in the living room, reading the paper. He looked up and froze. We need to talk, I said coldly. Now. I laid the folder on the coffee table. The letter. The news articles. April's photo. Richard didn't speak. His eyes locked on the handwriting like it was a ghost. Linda paled. You stole $7,000 meant for your granddaughter's surgery, I said. But I think that's not even close to the worst thing you've done. Richard slowly folded the paper and looked at me. I don't know what you think you found. Save it, I snapped. You have 24 hours to return the money. Or I go to the police with this. Linda's voice shook. Emily, you don't understand. I understand enough. And you should know this, I don't bluff. I turned and left them in silence. The next morning, a knock came at my door. An envelope. Inside, $7,000 in cash. No note. No apology. Jason called that afternoon from out of state. They told me they found the money in an old account, he said, confused. I guess it was a misunderstanding? I didn't correct him. Not yet. But in the back of my mind, I knew this wasn't over. Because secrets like these don't stay buried forever. And justice doesn't stop at money. The envelope sat on my kitchen table like it was radioactive. $7,000 in clean, crisp bills, returned without a word, apology, or explanation. Like they thought this could make it all go away. But I wasn't interested in just money anymore. Sophie's surgery was scheduled. That part was done. Now, I wanted the truth. And I wanted consequences. Jason came home 2 days later. He kissed Sophie, hugged me tight, and asked careful questions. I told him only what he needed to know, that his parents had temporarily borrowed the money without asking, and I'd pressed them to return it. He was furious. They had no right. You know what that money was for. I know, I said quietly. And I handled it. But I didn't tell him about April Harrow. Not yet. Not until I had proof that wouldn't shatter him without a purpose. Because what do you do when your father might have helped cover up the murder of a 16-year-old girl? What do you do when the people you trusted with your child's life have blood on their hands? Marla called the next morning. Your instincts were dead on, she said. I had a friend run Richard's name through the SBI database. Guess what showed up? My heart thudded. What? A sealed internal report from 1994. No charges filed. But there was a recommendation for disciplinary action due to procedural interference in a missing persons case. April's. Exactly. She paused. There's more. The station logs show he signed out a cruiser, one that was never logged as returned for nearly 8 hours the night April disappeared. What was his explanation? There wasn't one. The logs were never investigated. I swallowed hard. How does someone just walk away from that? Marla sighed. Back then? Small town. Tight-knit department. Sheriff probably swept it under the rug. Richard resigned the next week. Voluntary separation. Took his pension and disappeared from the radar. And reappeared here, in our quiet suburb, as a model grandparent. It made my stomach turn. That night, I sat across from Richard and Linda again. Only this time I wasn't angry, I was calm. Collected. Dangerous. I want a recorded confession, I said. Richard laughed. You think you can blackmail me? No. I can blackmail you. That's the difference. I slid a USB stick onto the table. Inside are the documents tying you to April Harrow's disappearance. A copy of the letter. Your vehicle logs. The SBI record. The works. Linda's hands trembled. Emily, please. I don't want your money. I want your cooperation. Richard leaned back, eyes narrowing. And what exactly are you asking me to do? You tell the SBI what happened that night. The truth. Everything. You tell them what you saw, or did. And if you don't, this goes public. I already have a backup sent to an outside attorney. The moment I die, or disappear, or get convinced to back down, the whole package goes to the press. I stood. You have 3 days. On the way home, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I wasn't a cop. I wasn't a lawyer. I was just a mom armed with desperation and documents. But sometimes, desperation is louder than power. Still, I knew I was playing with fire. If Richard really had been involved in April's death, what was stopping him from making me disappear? I changed all my locks. Installed cameras. Moved Sophie's crib into my room. And I waited. On the 3rd day, Marla called again. He walked into the SBI field office this morning. I gripped the phone tight. He gave them a statement, she continued. Not a full confession, but he admitted to helping Carl Harrow that night. He claimed Carl called him in a panic, said April ran away and hurt herself. Richard arrived to find April unconscious. Unconscious? I echoed. He says he helped Carl bury her body to protect his friend's family. He thought she was already dead. And you believe that? No, Marla said flatly. But it's enough to reopen the case. She paused. They've already contacted Carl Harrow. A search warrant for his old property is underway. If they find remains, or any physical evidence, it won't stop with him. Richard could still face obstruction charges. Maybe more. I felt my knees buckle and slid down against the wall, phone pressed to my cheek. What about April's family? I asked quietly. They'll finally get answers. 2 days later, news broke, remains found on former Harrow property, believed to be April Harrow. Investigation reopened. Jason came home that night, white-faced, holding his phone. Did you see this? He asked. I nodded. My throat tightened. They said it's my dad. That he was involved. That he knew where she was the whole time. I waited. He sank onto the couch like someone had pulled the bones from his body. You knew, he said after a long silence. Didn't you? Yes. For how long? Long enough to get the money back. Long enough to make him talk. He looked at me. And for the first time I saw a storm behind his eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew it would destroy you, I whispered. And I needed you strong for Sophie. Not broken. He ran a hand through his hair. You played them, he said. You used what you found. You blackmailed them. I protected our daughter. He didn't respond. We didn't talk much that night. Or the one after. Eventually, he understood. But something between us cracked, and it would take time to mend. Because when you look into the darkness in someone else's family, you can't help but feel it staring back at you. 2 weeks later, Richard Carter was arrested and charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and tampering with a crime scene. Carl Harrow was charged with second-degree murder. April's body was positively identified. The case that had haunted a small town for 30 years was finally coming to light. And it started with $7,000, stolen from a little girl's medical fund. The world didn't explode the way I thought it might. It cracked. Quietly. Like ice underfoot before it shatters. The headlines came first, local at first, then statewide. Retired officer implicated in cold case. Body found on former pastor's land. Murder charges filed after 30 years. But to me, the loudest headline was the one in my own house. Jason hadn't spoken to his parents in 9 days. He paced every night after Sophie went to sleep, staring out the window like he was waiting for an answer to fall from the stars. I don't know who they are anymore, he said one night. My whole childhood feels like a lie. They were your parents, I said gently. But that doesn't mean they were good people. I don't even know if my dad killed her, he murmured. But the fact that he helped bury a body, and never said a word. He trailed off. I grew up thinking he was a hero. I used to wear his old badge around the house. There was nothing I could say. So I just sat with him while the memories rewrote themselves in his mind. The community was stunned. Our phones buzzed constantly, neighbors asking if we were okay, friends asking if it was true. Even Jason's coworkers approached him differently now. There was a cloud around his last name. I stayed silent. I let the public draw their own conclusions. But I kept the original files. Just in case the silence came knocking again. Sophie's surgery went well. She came home with a smile and a tiny bandage, and to her, the world hadn't changed. We threw her a small bravery party with cupcakes and pink balloons. She danced in her new pajamas while Jason and I clapped, pretending everything was fine. But that night, as I tucked her in, she looked up at me with those huge eyes and asked, "Mama, are you happy?" I choked on the answer. "Yes, baby," I whispered. "I am now." The fallout with Linda came next. She showed up on our doorstep 2 weeks later, her eyes bloodshot and her face gaunt like she hadn't slept in days. "Please," she said. "I need to see my granddaughter." Jason stood in the doorway like a statue. "Did you know?" he asked. She said nothing. "Mom," he repeated, voice cracking, "did you know about April Harrow?" Tears streamed down her face. I knew something. I didn't want to believe it. "Your father," he said it was complicated. That he was protecting someone. "And you just let it go?" I was scared, Jason. We had a life. You were so young. I didn't want it to fall apart. "It was already broken," he said, voice flat. "You just helped hide the pieces." She turned to me, desperate. "Emily, please. Let me talk to her. Just for a minute." I shook my head. Sophie doesn't need any more secrets. She deserves peace. Linda broke. Right there on the porch. Collapsed onto her knees like a woman mourning a ghost. But I didn't let her in. Weeks passed. The case consumed the news cycle, but then it faded, like all news does. The world moved on. But we didn't. Jason took a leave from work. He started therapy, alone at first, then with me. And slowly, painfully, we began to heal. One night, months later, he turned to me in bed and whispered, "You saved our daughter's life. And maybe mine too." I didn't answer. I just reached for his hand. The trial for Carl Harrow was scheduled for the fall. Richard Carter took a plea deal, 2 years for obstruction, no parole. He'd served time in a minimum security facility. Jason didn't fight it. He just said, "Let him sit with it." Every day. April's parents attended every hearing. I never introduced myself. I didn't need to. But one day, her mother left a note on my windshield, "Thank you for not forgetting her." That was enough. I think about justice a lot now. How it doesn't always come wrapped in a bow. How it costs pieces of you. How silence and secrets rot from the inside until someone, anyone, is brave enough to dig them up. I never asked to be that person. I was just a mom, trying to protect her kid. But sometimes, that's exactly who brings the house down. The leaves were turning gold when they buried her. 30 years too late. I stood at the back of the small hilltop cemetery, holding Jason's hand. Sophie was with my sister. I didn't want her to see a funeral before she could even spell the word. This one wasn't for her. It was for the girl who never got to grow up. April Harrow's headstone was simple. April Lynn Harrow. 1978 to 1994. She was sunshine. Her mother held a framed photo, a girl with a crooked smile, braces on her teeth, and eyes that somehow looked like they knew too much. Jason watched the service silently. He didn't cry. I think he was too numb. Afterward, her parents approached us. Mr. Harrow's face was lined with grief that never aged. "I'm told you were the reason we found her." "I don't need thanks," I said quietly. But Mrs. Harrow shook her head. "You deserve it anyway. We've waited half a lifetime for closure. And you gave it to us. I'm so sorry it took this long." "So are we," she said, voice cracking. "So are we." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table and opened a folder I hadn't touched since the confession, the one with all the documents I used to bring Richard down. It felt like holding a piece of fire. So much pain packed into papers and silence. Jason walked in around midnight, rubbing his eyes. "You're still up?" I couldn't let it go. He sat across from me and looked at the file. "Are you ever going to delete it?" I shook my head. "I want to remember what secrets can cost." He was quiet for a moment. "I hated you for a while, you know." "I know. I thought you destroyed my family." "I didn't," I said gently. "The lies did." Jason exhaled hard and ran a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time to move." "Move?" "A fresh start. Somewhere Sophie can grow up without people whispering our last name." I nodded. "I've been thinking the same." 2 months later, we packed up and left. Not far, just a few hours away. Close enough for the hospital follow-ups. Far enough for peace. We bought a modest home near a park. Sophie loved it. Jason got a new job. I started working part-time at a nonprofit for missing children. I wanted to turn pain into purpose. Life didn't go back to what it was. But it moved forward. One morning, I was filing old case notes when a volunteer knocked. "There's someone here asking for you," she said. I walked into the lobby to find a girl, maybe 19, maybe 20, holding a baby on her hip. She looked nervous. Her clothes were clean but worn. "Are you Emily Carter?" she asked. "I am. I heard what you did for April Harrow. Someone said you helped bring her home." I nodded, heart thumping. "I did what I could." She bit her lip. "My sister went missing last year. No one's really looking anymore. But I saw your name online. I thought maybe you'd care." I walked over and knelt beside her. I care. Sit down. Let's talk. That night, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she asked, Mommy, are you happy now? I smiled. Yeah, baby. I think I am. She yawned. Even though Grandpa was bad? I paused. Yes. Even then. Because we chose to be good. Are you gonna help more girls like April? I hope so. She snuggled deeper into her blanket. I hope she's happy now, too. I think she is. Sometimes justice looks like courtrooms. Sometimes it looks like graves. But sometimes, it looks like a little girl asking if you're happy, and being able to answer yes. April didn't get to grow up. But because of her, my daughter will. Safely. Honestly. And that's the only justice that matters. Her name was April. And I will never forget her.